Hi buddy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 8.4 support tier list video. So if you want to find the timestamps, you can find those in the description. You'll also find a link to the Google Doc as well in there. So if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, that should help you navigate. So we're going to start off just talking very briefly about the patch notes, a couple of the major changes as it impacts the support role, and then we'll go over the tier list itself, the top 5 and other roles, and then the tier list. And if you want to know which specific runes I recommend, you can click on the Google Doc for each individual champion, and it'll have the updated runes that I recommend. Now, I still need to do a couple of them, especially for the tank champions, so I should have those prepared maybe later on tonight after I finish the video. I have to go hang out with some friends here in about a half hour or so, but when I get back, I might be able to get some of those upgraded, but most of them are up to date. And they will be shortly after the video posts, but I need to go ahead and get this done, so we're going to do it. Alright, so just real briefly, let's go into the patch notes. The TLDR is the GP nerf is only going to matter for competitive. It's not going to matter at Plat Minus. Most people don't play GP very well at Plat and Under anyways. And that's most of the viewership for my videos, I think. So, you know, I think it'll hurt him. He certainly won't be as good. It also hurts him that he can no longer run Iron Skin plus Second Wind. That'll hurt his laning phase quite a bit. So I think he'll be alright still, but in solo queue, I don't think he's going to be that great for the vast majority of the population. And in competitive, you'll still see him some probably, but not as much as he has been. The Ornn nerf, mostly for competitive. If you like playing Ornn a lot top, that's a pretty big nerf for him. But it's tough to tell exactly what this is going to do, because they kind of increase the damage here, but like in the best case scenario, it's less damage than it was. So ultimately, I think it's bad for Ornn. I didn't think he was that rough in competitive right now anyways. I thought he was not really picked that often in 8.3 as I'm watching some of the games unfold. You know, over the last week or so, I didn't think he was that overpowered, but it looks like a pretty big nerf to him again. I have an entire video about the AP itemization. I have that linked here as well if you want to watch that, so I'm not going to go over that in this video. Just watch that. I have, you know, timestamps, Google Doc, all that stuff. So I break it all down for you. You know, the TLDR of that is Leandri's is really strong. Archangel's Staff got buffed and is really strong. And Deathcap is a lot stronger. We'll talk about that when we start talking about the supports and the tier list here in just a second. Darius probably won't matter that much. He's better, but I don't think it's going to move his position in the meta too much. Just talked about Gangplank, Gnar. I don't think that's going to matter too much. If anything, that's probably a nerf at competitive. He does get more damage for hopping on people's heads, but I don't think that's going to matter that much. Poppy, little tiny buff. I don't think it's going to matter that much. Renekton, little buff, not going to matter. Jax, minor buff. I mean, that's good that, you know, he could still get hit for like that extra quarter of a second. It's good they fixed that bug. I don't think that's going to change his position too much. Frozen Mallet is basically the Gnar special, so that's a nerf to Gnar. Now it only slows people by 20% instead of 30. I'm not sure how much that'll impact his build, but even if he no longer wants to get Frozen Mallet, I think he'll have other choices that would also be good. So I don't think that's a huge deal. Evelyn, decent buff. You know, they did just buff some of the AP items, so maybe you'll see her more, but I don't think she's I don't think she'll be that much of a force. Fiddlesticks is interesting buff. It is going to give him better clear in the jungle with his Dark Wind, and then he gets to Crowstorm more, but I still don't expect him to be a major player in the jungle. He's okay. Callista basically got gutted. You know, they're changing out her attack speed for bonus attack damage, which is trash on her. She doesn't really have attack damage scaling that's noteworthy on most things, and she has a as part of her passive, she actually gets reduced attack damage. She's the only champion in the game that gets reduced attack damage. So it's like she only gets 90% benefit from attack damage. So AD is really bad on her as a stat, and so I don't know. Like, they're saying they want to make her last hitting consistent, why they gave her AD instead of attack speed. I would say that the AD could also make it feel inconsistent. I don't really think that argument holds up too well. But yeah, I mean, I guess her Pierce does have 100%, you know, AD on it, and this does have, you know, it does have, she does have AD ratios, I suppose, on some of her things. Where does it say how much damage this does? Does it not do any damage? Huh. I never knew that. I didn't realize it did 0 damage. Okay. But anyways, it's a nerf to her. I mean, the big thing that's the huge nerf is the range. Like, knocking attack range down from 550 to 525 is a really big deal. Just ask Lucian. His is 500, so it's lower than that. But, you know, lowering attack range, that's, like, one of the most important stats for an AD carry. So that's really rough. And they're nerfing her base attack damage. Now, she does get a lot of extra attack speed per level, which is good. And she has a higher base. Costing more for Rend is important. I mean, here's the thing. Kallista's not really that great in solo queue most of the time anyway. She's okay, but she's really hard to play. And she takes a lot of practice. Like, you almost have to one-trick her unless you're a pro player to be good with her. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty big nerf for her. Kog'Maw, they buffed him back to 6% instead of the original 7% that he was at. So I think he'll be viable again. Perhaps not as strong as he was, but still pretty viable. Rengar, this is a lot of changes. You know, it's hard for me to really assess this properly because I'm not doing a full-out patch video for this this cycle. I'm just not going to have time. I have to travel this weekend, and the earliest I could possibly get something like that out would be Monday, and it's just going to be, you know, halfway through the patch by the time I do that, so I'm just going to hold off on that and just serve this as a mini patch cycle. I've played against him once, and he was really powerful, but I don't know if he just got fed or not. I think he's on the strong side, but I just don't know. I don't have enough sample sizes, and this is so much. This is like 15 different changes to him or something. It's difficult to tell. I think he's definitely stronger than he was. Mostly because his Q is an auto attack reset now. But anyways, so I think he's strong. Shyvana is a pretty sizable nerf. Press the attack is better at later levels, but it's worse at earlier levels. So I think ultimately she's going to fall off a little bit. She's all right, probably still, but not nearly as good as she was. I mean, that's quite a bit of damage. It's like 50% less damage on that second Q proc. Swain, I think Swain's like, he was okay anyways, and this is a buff to him, so I mean, we'll see. I think he'll be kind of middle of the pack. He'll be all right. Talon, he could be okay still. I don't know. I mean, I think he'll be about the same as he was. Kind of a middle of the pack, like, really feast or famine assassin. If you get really far ahead, he's great. If you fall behind, he's totally worthless. Tristana, this doesn't matter that much, I don't think. She's still the strongest AD carry. I mean, this is a slap on the wrist. 120 seconds is still really low cooldown. So she's still going to be the best. Now, this is pretty meaningful for Twitch. Contaminate. Now, it's just the first, you know, stack of it or whatever, the base damage. And then the bonus damage is the same. So you're basically losing 40 damage off of this, which is pretty significant if you have a low number of stacks. But they're saying because of press the attack, nobody's going to get press the attack on Twitch, though, I don't think. You know, everybody's going to be doing fleet footwork, so he makes it through the laning phase. So it's just a straight nerf to him. I think he'll still be good, but this definitely hurts him. Volibear, it's tough to say. I think he'll still be kind of like a middle to bottom of the pack. Although, I mean, it is cool, the combo, that like you can flip somebody and then Majestic Roar him to do that extra damage. I don't think it's going to matter enough. This doesn't solve his problem. Like, he doesn't have a good gap closer. Like, he just has to run at people. Like, he doesn't have a dash or a flash or anything like that to get to people. So I think that's sort of his main issue, is he's just kind of like an old school brand of champion where he just has to run up and just, you know, auto attack people to death, and that's just not really a good place to be in this meta for most champions. There are, I mean, like Jax is a little different because he has a stun, and he just does a ton of damage off of his autos, and he has several auto attack resets with his itemization and his W, and he's just he has that gap closer of his jump. So like, Jax is just a better Volibear is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know. I just don't think that Volibear is going to be that great. Zen, you know, they nerfed quite a few things about him. I didn't think he was that oppressive to begin with. I mean, he's okay. But yeah, it's definitely a nerf, so he's going to fall down a little bit. I don't think this is going to matter that much for Zed. I mean, late game, it does help him, but he's still on the challenging side to play. If he gets ahead, he's very strong. You know, against certain champions, especially ones that have heals and shields, like Lulu and Janna, who are going to become a lot more popular on this patch, he can have some problems because there's so much time to counterplay his ult if you have a heal or a shield, so he's alright. Zoe's completely gutted, like 10 different nerfs to her. I mean, this is the nail in the coffin. I mean, even like her win rate is just like abysmal. Now, there's only a couple of days of data here, but like 42% is just like ridiculous. So yeah, she's really rough right now. I didn't think she was that oppressive in solo queue to begin with. Like, yeah, she's annoying, and I've had some games against a good Zoe where I'm like, man, that's really frustrating. But, you know, I've had those kind of games against all kinds of champions, so I didn't think she was so bad that you had to completely destroy her, but I guess Riot disagreed. I mean, they pretty much said in the patch that they just want to destroy her until they figure it out. We'd rather hit as many frustration points as we can. Pretty much is what they said. So they're just like, we're going to completely gut her and then build her back up with buffs until she's viable again. Alright, Ancient Coin gets some movement speed. It's good. Targon's, I don't think that's like game breaking or anything, but having an extra 10 movement speed, I think is like 200 gold worth of value. I can't remember the exact value of one movement speed. Maybe it's not that high, but it's pretty good. It's a nice little nod in the right direction. Now, this nerf here is pretty significant, especially at the tier 3. Taking it from 500 to 350 health is a very big deal. And that's like 300 less gold of efficiency. Even more than that, let me see. Yeah, it's like 400 gold loss of efficiency. So they're lowering the cost by 100, but you're basically losing 300 gold on it. So that's rough. And early on, losing like a third of the health that it provides is a pretty big deal. So that's rough for tank supports, especially with the nerfs to resolve. Wit's End, that matters for like Varus and Kog'Maw sometimes if they choose to itemize for that. Otherwise, it's not going to matter. So that's going to make them a bit more susceptible to magic, but I don't think it's going to really move their position in the meta too much. Precision, press the attacks, pretty huge nerf early on. I mean, they do give it 10 extra damage, but they're taking it down to 4% extra damage instead of 12% extra damage. So that's a pretty big deal. So yeah, they're giving it a little bit more, like flat damage on the proc, but then they are taking away the damage amp. So in sustained trades, it's going to be a lot weaker early on. So it's good if you just do like a real quick like 3-hit run and then like dash away or something, like with Illusion. But for champions who want to sit in there and fight for a long time, like a Shyvana, that's gonna be a pretty big nerf, I think. Okay, Resolve. This is a huge nerf to the Resolve tree. They are adding in Bone Plating. I'm not exactly sure how good this will be. I think it'll be good on all-in champs, but it's not going to be as good for champs like Peel tanks. Because people can just trigger it. You know, they can just hit you with something and trigger. It's kind of like Guardian to some extent. Except it doesn't even matter if you're... Like with Guardian, you can play around that by just not standing close to your ally. And it won't get triggered if they hit you. But with this, like, anytime they hit you with anything, it's not even a basic attack. Like, a Zyra plant could just randomly trigger this when it's off cooldown. So I think in the laning phase for support tanks, it's not going to be that great unless you really, like, play around it. You're like, okay, got bone plating, I'm Alistar, I'm going in right now before they have a chance to poke it off of me. So maybe with certain trading patterns, you know, this plus Aftershock will give you a ton of tankiness in trading. It's probably going to be best used as like a melee on melee rune in the top lane. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's okay. The big change here is that you can no longer take Second Wind. You have to choose either Second Wind or Iron Skin or Mirror Shell. You can't have Iron Skin or Mirror Shell, one of the defensive things, plus Second Wind. So that's going to hurt a lot of tank champions because that combo is very strong early game. And they didn't replace it with anything good. Like, Unflinching, Revitalize, and Overgrowth is trash. So now, for a lot of tank champions, especially ones that aren't going to engage a lot, so like a Tom Kench or like a Braum or something. Like both of these trees are pretty bad. Like the second tier and the fourth tier are both pretty trash. So that's making it a lot harder on tanks, a lot harder. So I mean, I guess a lot of them will have to go with Unflinching. Now, some exceptions would be like Taric and Rakan because they like Revitalize. So champions who can go Second Wind and Revitalize, this is actually a buff for them. So I think it's a buff for Janna, the way that I like to rune her. It's a buff for Rakan, and it's a buff for Taric, but it's like a nerf to people like Tom Kench and Braum. And Alistar. Alistar can at least like play around bone plating a little bit more and all in, but it's going to be tough on a lot of tanks. Inspiration, so now Stopwatch is way worse than it already is, and they took away the free 20% that you get, so now you have to get a rune, basically, to get the 20% longer elixirs. So that's kind of rough. I like the Elder and Baron buffs. You know, it just makes them more meaningful, so that you can close out games faster, so that's good. Okay, so that's kind of my TLDR, like, super quick patch notes. So the takeaway here, Zyra is going to be a top tier support for solo queue. I thought she was already getting pretty good near the end of the last patch after some of the nerfs to other tank things in previous patches, and Inspiration specifically. Then I think that makes her pretty good. And now she's going to get a lot better. Not only did she get some like really big direct buffs by the buffs to Rylai's and Liandry's, which are both like core awesome items on her. And those are the items you should get. Rylai's and Liandry's. You should do Liandry's first, then Rylai's. After Liandry's, you can think about Oblivion Orb if you want, but that would give you some more immediate power at the cost of scaling, because the full-on Morello's is not really that great in terms of cost efficiency. Unless you like really need it to cut healing, it's not going to give you as much power as completing something like Rylai's or Void Staff or Death Cap. So Zyra, I think, is going to be the best AP user. Brand will probably be a really popular one. He's easier to play than Zyra, and he's pretty good as well, but I think Zyra is a lot better. I'll talk about why when we get down to the tier list here in a second. I think Vel'Koz will potentially, if you're like familiar with Vel'Koz and decent with Vel'Koz, I think he's a good counter pick to Zyra and Brand. He just outranges both of them, and he has a really consistent, powerful team fight with his ult. And just really good poke, and he's also great with Liandry's. So, and he's really, like, that Madness buff, the 10% extra damage applies to his true damage on his ult, so that's a ton of extra damage after you proc that. So Vel'Koz is very, very good with that. You might even see Vel'Koz more in the middle because of those buffs, but he's really hard to play correctly. There's a lot of counterplay to his ability, so we'll see. Like, I wouldn't pick him probably over Zyra or Brand bot lane, but he's good as, like, a counter pick to him. Pretty solid champion. Fiddlesticks and Malzahar might come back a little bit as supports. We'll see. You keep your eye on those. Anivia might be a secret, like, support that's viable. I know she's going to be great in the mid lane. Like, she's just very good with tier. Now that you don't have to buy Sightstone anymore, you have that extra 800 gold you can use on tier. And then she's super good with Liandry's, because she already has a slow on like multiple of her abilities, so she can get the full value out of it. And she scales really hard with AP, so she's good with Death Cap. So, you know, something like Archangel, Death Cap, Liandry's would just be extremely strong on her as support if you can get that. Now, those are all expensive items, but she does have very good wave clear too. So she has nice CC, nice sort of zone control. Like, she's really good in the mid lane, and, you know, some of that might be able to translate down to support. The problem is, like, you know, she doesn't have really consistent poke. She does have a long auto attack range of 600, so that's really good. Like, you can sneak in a bunch of autos down there. But, like, her Q is relatively easy to dodge if you're going for an all-in, and if that's down, you're really weak. But, like, post 6, you might be able to pick off some pretty good... you might have some opportunities for some really good kills. So I don't know. Like, if you have someone like a Varus who can stun somebody with his R, and then she's going to be able to land her Q on him, then, you know, you might be able to just completely delete him. So she could be good with kill lanes like Misfortune, or like Misfortune's E slows him, and then Anivia would be able to hit him with her Q. Like, if you have something that can slow him down, and then you hit him with the Q and blow him up, That could be really good. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Like, she might be a sleeper. Like, okay, I played her once, a donation game from Talith before the nerf, and she's all right. She's a lot better than I thought she was going to be. So her problem, you know, historically has been, you know, she doesn't have the mana as support. Well, they just buffed here a lot, including when you complete Archangels, giving you 400 more mana, so that helps a ton. And she, like, her items that she wants and needs are, like, very expensive. But now with the Leandries and all of that buff, then now she's going to hit her power spike even faster because she's such a good Leandries user. So, I don't know. We might see the bird in the bot lane. We'll see. And yeah, the combination on a lot of champions will be Leandries plus either Rylai's or Oblivion Stone, and then Void Staff. Twin Shadows is too expensive to be good on most champions. I mean, maybe you could see it on a champion that, you know, has a very powerful catch mechanic. It's like if you slow them and then hit them with an Anivia Q, or you slow them and you hit them with something else, like maybe you can do that. But you're paying like 800 gold for this, and that's a lot of efficiency off of your items that you could get with other items. Because when you're getting Twin Shadows, like, you could pay just a little bit more and get a Void Staff, or you could pay just a little bit more and get like a, I don't know, just other AP items that are going to be more effective. Rylai's, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think AP supports will be really good. Most notably that you'll see a lot of are Zyra and Brand. I was seeing Brand banned in a lot of my games yesterday, so I think people understand that Brand's going to be really good. Zyra, I think, is better, but she's harder to play, as I said before. Okay, and then I think tank supports are going to fall for the reasons that I talked about. The Resolve runes hurt a lot. You can't do Iron Skin plus second win anymore. Equinox is down a lot. That minus 150 is rough. Zyra and Janna are both very good, and they already were against peel tanks. Janna's going to get a lot better because she just has better runes itemization. The changes to now where she can get second wind and revitalize, that's actually good for her. Because now she can go Guardian, Font of Life, second wind, and revitalize. And that's all, like, super good for her kit early on. So I think that Janna is getting a lot better. And then Zyra is going to be sort of the queen AP, and she's really good against Braum and Tom. I mean, they just can't. And a lot of it is they're losing a lot of their innate sort of healing. They already nerfed Targon's healing the previous patch, and now the entire thing is going to give you less health, and they basically you can't do Mirror Shield plus second wind. So I think that both of these champions are a nightmare for like Braum, Taric, Tom, even Alistar to a lesser extent, although Alistar can engage and try to kill them at least, so that he's got that going for him. But yeah, they're a nightmare for different reasons, but they're both very, very good against him. And then I think that scaling DPS mages are going to be good, and, you know, with the amount of damage going to be coming out of some of these AP champions, like Anivia, like Azir, Ryze, Vlad, I just don't think that the tanks are going to have enough, like, they're just not going to have enough juice to peel all that off. You know, like Tom Kench, Braum, these champions just are not going to be able to do enough against these, like, these champions. So I think that it's going to be rough. There's just going to be too much damage for the tanks. The tanks have been nerfed too much, and now there's just too much damage on the AP champions for support tanks to really do a lot meaningfully near the end of the game. Okay, so the best 5 for other roles, and we'll get into the tier list here. We'll try to run through that pretty quickly. We've got top lane. I still think that Nasus, or however you want to pronounce him, Alawi are going to be the best for solo queue, especially at gold and lower. They're still pretty playable at platinum. They start to fall off at diamond, but, you know, most people watching this are probably gold or lower, I would imagine. So yeah, this is just for the majority of solo queue. Like, this is not a pro, you know, pro player, challenger player tier list. It's trying to cover a lot of different elos, but mostly kind of the you know, the top 9 or the bottom 95% of players instead of the top 5%. Okay, so Nasus is still really good. You know, the second wind Iron Skin nerfs do hurt him. But he has so much excess power, I still think he'll be alright. Alawi, still really good. They didn't really, I mean, once again, the Iron Skin second wind is going to hurt her a little bit, but I still think she's great, especially against other melee champions top. Their scaling is just really difficult to deal with. You know, if someone just doesn't sit on their lane and camp them, like, they just take over. the game a lot of the times. Camille is going to be, you know, one of the better fighters coming out of this. So I still think that Camille will be really good. Vlad is the huge winner on the AP side. I mean, Vlad is kind of hard to play. I don't understand why he's hard to play, but I see a lot of Vlads fail. So I don't know, but I think that he could come back top lane. He's already like really good if you're good with him, but he definitely got a lot better because of the Leandries, and now people can't take second win plus mirror shield against him in the top lane, so he's going to get a lot better. And then I think Swain, with the buff and with the changes to AP itemization, could be decent top lane. Rumble's another one to watch out for top lane who could be really good, potentially. Rumble historically loves to get Leandries, Rylai's, so this will help him out a lot. He may not even need to get Rylai's. You could get like Leandries and it's like Void Staff or something. I don't know. Because he does have a slow on his ult and he can slow with his harpoons. But you might see Rumble a lot more top too. We'll see. In the jungle, I don't think too much has been shaken up here. Skarner was kind of a surprise on this patch, at least for me. I know that the buff was a pretty big deal in the last patch notes. I said, you know, he could be a lot better because that extra half-second stun was big, but he's getting picked a lot in competitive, which I didn't think it would go that far. And he's pretty easy to play, you know. You just walk up and ult people, and you have your 1.5-second stun on your E that can hit multiple targets. That's really good. So I think Skarner is definitely someone who's risen up a lot. Good clear, good CC. The nerf to champions like Shyvana are going to help him out a lot. Just these, and Xin Zhao, just these early beatdown champions, and Lee. Lee just got completely punched in the face this patch because now he can't use his ward jumping anymore. So Lee is just like deleted as a champion basically until they figure out something to do with him. So yeah, that opens up a good space for Skarner. And then they've nerfed Jarvan over time too, and some of these other early game champions. So I think Skarner's pretty good. Warwick's similar to Skarner. I think he just kind of does what Skarner wants to do better. He just has that innate sustain and healing. Anything that heals is going to be a lot better because more people are going to skip Morello's now because it doesn't have the mana on it, and so that means there's going to be less healing debuffs running around. People are already moving away from Thornmail, and now they're going to move away from Morello on a lot of champions. So that just leaves us with Executioners, and that's a huge tax on the AD carry. If they want to pay the 800 gold tax for Executioners, then that slows down their build at least. So they can still have an answer for you, but it's going to be a lot harder because they'll also have to get Quicksilver Sash if they don't want to be suppressed. So that puts Skarner in a really good position where a lot of these, especially AD carries, are going to have to get 2 utility items if they want to deal with him. And that means they're not going to have enough damage to kill him, potentially. It's like, okay, well, you broke his ult. Now you kind of shut out his healing, but he's just going to kill you because you don't have enough damage to kill him. So I think Warwick's still going to be amazing in solo queue. Once again, you're not going to see him in pro play, but he's great in solo queue. Skarner. Sejuani, still really strong, I think. Very, reliable, good stun, good CC. I mean, it's kind of goofy, but you could even see something. I don't know if people would get a Leandries on her, but the thing to remember about Leandries is that the Madness does 10% extra damage, right? And now, so that includes on your magic damage, and that includes on your physical damage. So when you're in there just like auto-attacking, with Sejuani, I wonder if pros are doing that now that I said it. I mean, you wouldn't rush it or anything, but if you want just like, a damage item on her as like a 3rd or a 4th item in solo queue, like you won't see people build that in pro play, but it's possible in solo queue if you just think you're not quite doing enough damage that you could run something like a Leandries on her because you already have so many slows that would give you even more percentage damage because your E, your flail or whatever, you hit them multiple times. No, I'm thinking of the old flail. Either way, you're constantly hitting them with something that's like a slow or magic damage, I think. Trying to think. Okay, so the charge is going to hit him. Yeah, that ends up being on a pretty low cooldown. I'm pretty sure this is what you max first a lot of times, Winter's Wrath. So that slows them and knocks them back. Yeah. And so you can keep applying this in fights. Or it knocks back minions. It doesn't knock back the player. But yeah, so you can basically, you can apply slows, ability slow damage to a lot of people in team fights. So I think Leandries could be a reasonable option as like a 3rd or 4th item if you really need extra damage. But either way, she's super tanky. She has pretty good clear, good percentage-based damage with her Shatter, or whatever it's called, Icebreaker. So I think she's still great. Zac is good. He's a little bit... He takes a bit more skill. Like, you really have to land your E's with Zac. But once again, he's a healer, and that's great when Morello's not going to be around. I think that if you're good on Zac, he's going to be a true terror. And you will see him in pro play quite a bit. You've been seeing him more. But yeah, he's really, really good here. Leandri's great on him. Let's see. Obviously, you don't get Rylai's or anything, and you get mostly tanks stuff. You know, you'd go like Cinderhulk, Wormhog most of the time, but once again, you need a little extra damage. Leandri's is there. It does give you the health. I don't think he has great AP scaling. Maybe that's why they wouldn't do it on Sejuani as well. It doesn't have great AP scaling, so it's a little odd. You probably won't see it most of the time, but I think that it's an option. Once again, pro level, you're not going to see it, but in solo queue, if your team is just not performing, you know, your AD carry's like down 0-12, and you just need to do a bit more damage, Leandri's, you know, could potentially be an option after you get, you know, like your boots, your Cinderhulk, your Warmog, like a defensive item. It's like a 4th or a 5th item. And then Rammus is just really good. Has great ganks throughout the whole game. Just a true terror. Scales pretty well. Great against AD champions. Now, people are going to be playing AP a lot more, so it's possible Rammus falls quite a bit because he's kind of weak to AP champions. So we'll see about that. I don't know who else would slot in there. I mean, it's possible. I don't think Ivern would come back in. I mean, Nunu could be someone, again, who could run like a Leandri's, but it's probably really weird on him. No, he's still going to build all the support stuff. I don't know. I would put Rammus in there tentatively, and you can, you know, just throw in another, you know, jungle champion or whatever if you think that he's going to be too weak. We'll see. I think he'll still be good, but later in the game, he could have a problem against mages, who are probably going to become pretty popular. Okay, mid lane. This is the hardest one because there are a ton of different things that are viable in the mid lane. But, you know, I think that Talia's going to be really good. She loves Leandri's. I think Rylai's pretty good on her too. She was a lot of Talia's were already getting GLP, and I think this is an upgrade to GLP for her because it's going to have the 20% CDR on it now, which is excellent. It's going to allow her to roam a lot more. And it's going to give her that slow so that she can land her W more often to full-in combo somebody. So, and GLP combos pretty well with Leandri's because it applies a slow to them. And then when you hit them with your abilities, it's going to give you that Leandri's burn. So that's pretty good. So I think Talia is going to be really strong now. I think Anivia, I mean, Anivia might be #1. We'll see. But I think that Talia will probably be a little bit better, but Anivia is easier to play. Anivia is still on the tricky side to play, but you don't have to think about, like, roaming or, like, how you're going to use your ultimate as much with Anivia as you do with Talia. But yeah, Anivia, as I explained before, amazing. They just buffed Tyr, Deathcap, and Leandri's. All of those are fantastic on Anivia. And I think that her win rate is going to skyrocket. You might even see her in pro play a little bit. We'll see. She doesn't really fit the pro meta as much in the sense that it's hard to roam around with her, but she's such a great zone control mage. Yeah, you might see more of her. I think that she was almost near the top of the solo queue already. Yeah, she's #3. So, you know, the standings don't always matter, but I think she's going to be really good. Now, Fizz is super good too, especially at gold and lower, and I don't exactly know why this guy's taken off. I think that maybe some of his things that are good against him just aren't as popular right now. People just can't punish him as much in lane, or they just don't. So I'm not really sure what's up with that. Like, there's nothing that just jumps out at me, like why Fizz is just kind of taken over lately, but I ban him a lot in my games because he does. Like, he's just in the game, and then I'm just looking at mid lane, and I'm like, okay, you know, it's Fizz against Orianna or something like that. I'm like, Ori should be up 30 CS in lane, and then we can win. And then the next thing you know, it's like 10 minutes, Fizz is 3-0, and he's up 30 CS. And I'm like, how does that happen? Because that used to be Fizz's whole narrative, was he would just get completely busted up in lane, and then if you survived and you managed to pick up an item or two in like 20 minutes, then you were powerful. But now it just seems like people just don't punish him enough. Maybe it's the runes, but I don't see anything like in the runes that would jump out at me. I mean, maybe Ravenous Hunter helps him a lot. Survive. Sudden Impact and Electrocute are obviously pretty good on him, but I can't explain it. I mean, but I do know that whenever I see this guy, he's really scary these days. Like, you can beat him, but if he gets ahead, it's very, very difficult because it's so hard to get a hold of him, to CC him, and his damage is so extreme that he's just going to be difficult to deal with. So nothing on this patch particularly, you know, shuts him out. I think the fall of Malzahar may have helped him a lot in mid lane. I'm not sure, but he's still going to end up getting, like, Protobelt Lichbane type of champion. Deathcap would be really good with that combo because Protobelt and Lichbane scale off of your total AD, or total AP, rather, so the Deathcap buff is really nice for him. You could do a Leandri's. I mean, he does apply a slow with his fish. Oh, they did change. When did they change his fish? Because that's one thing that I did notice, and I don't remember this always happening when we look at him. Now it says, this applies his passive when he lands the fish. And that's huge, because that means when you go up and hit him, you're going to get the triple damage. So before, you had to auto-attack and wait 2 seconds, and then empowered auto-attack. But now you can auto-reset auto. So now this also applies. When did they do that? I could have sworn that hasn't always been the case. I don't know. Maybe they changed it a long time ago and I just didn't notice. Maybe that was something they just didn't include in the patch notes. I don't know. Anyways, he's really strong right now, so I expect him to keep going. I don't know why Kassadin's fallen out either. It seems like Fizz is kind of the go-to, like, AP assassin. Fizz is harder to CC and get a hold of than Kassadin, but Kassadin is going to be tankier later in the game. I think it's just because Fizz has more kill threat and it's easier to snowball with him earlier. And he's safer pre-6. Maybe that's it. But you might start seeing Kassadin come back up because a lot of these mages are coming back. So, I don't know. It's hard for me not to put Kassadin in the top 5. Like, it's really hard to do the middle top 5. So, Kassadin could easily be in here. Maybe instead of Malzahar. I don't know. I think that Vlad's going to be really strong. I already talked about that with him. You know, everything, a lot of things got buffed. He's going to love it. He likes Rylai's. He likes Deathcap. He definitely likes Leandri's. And so, there's just a lot of really good stuff moving in his way. And he likes when other people don't buy Morellos. So that's going to be great for Vlad. And then Malzahar I put here because he's a really good Leandri's Rylai's user that slows people down. So they're going to take damage over time. They're slowed. It's going to be applying Leandri's the whole time. And that's going to allow his minions to hit people more often. So that's just like peanut butter and jelly on Malzahar. He loves getting Leandri's Rylai's. And I don't think that he has to get a mana item because his E refunds a lot of his mana, I think. Which means he could rush Leandri's. Maybe not. I mean, maybe he still has to get a mana item. We'll see. There's not a huge sample size for him. You know, so I guess he could go Ludens. I don't know. Ludens feels so bad, though. Like, I'd rather go, like, GLP or something, but I guess he doesn't need the slow for his ult, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I just feel like Malzahar still has a really good kit for solo queue. Like, it's great for push and split. Really good at picking people off. They have nerfed him a lot the last few patches, but I think he'll still be good. And he's a good Leandri's Rylai's user. Even if you don't rush it immediately, you could get it second or third. That'd be really good. As far as AD carries go, I think that Tristana, Jinx, Varus, Xayah, Twitch will probably be it. Triss got a slap on the wrist. She'll still be really strong. Jinx is still going to be the top hyper carry, I think, with, well, kind of sharing that spot with Tristana. Jinx is just really easy to use. You just point, click, blow people up. Very simple champion. And she has, if someone crowd controls, you can just point, click, throw chompers on them. So she has a good sort of CC chain with other crowd control champions. So if, like, Zyra lands a root on somebody, for example, Jinx throws chompers on them, they're dead. So, you know, she just has a pretty decent kit there. And then, of course, she snowballs really hard if she ever gets a kill in a fight. And she takes towers really quick. So she's kind of like Tristana. She's just a little bit less safe than Trist is. She's a lot less mobile. But she's still pretty good. Varus is another one. In competitive, Varus will be really popular. But in solo queue, it's just so easy to mess Varus up. You know, he can miss his ults. You can people will itemize incorrectly with him. You know, they won't get the Gensus. The nerf to Wits End does hurt him a little bit against AP champions. But he's still really good. He has a long range, good utility, good sustained damage later in the game. Zyra's another one who's coming up a lot because a lot of other AD champions are getting nerfed. She's kind of going under the radar. She has really good burst damage. Once she gets to 3 items, she's super strong. Rakan's going to get a lot better because a lot of the other tanks are going out of the meta. So like Taric, Tom, Braum are all kind of shifting out. So that creates more space for Rakan. And Rakan and Zyra are a fantastic combo bot lane. So I think that Zyra is going to come back a little bit. And then Twitch dropped. I still want to keep him in the top 5 because he is Twitch after all. But that nerf to his E I'm a little worried about. And the nerf to some sustain in lane because he's maybe less likely to have a tank support with him that can heal him with Targons. So he'll still be around. He'll still be pretty strong probably. But he might deserve to be higher. Maybe I'm underestimating him. But he's still good. You know, things like Draven can still be really strong too. Like, there are several champions that can be good. I will note that I think that Caitlyn is picked a lot and that she's not that great in solo queue. She's one of the hardest AD carries to play because people don't use her traps and her combos correctly. Ezreal has fallen down a lot. He just feels like he's a non-factor in a lot of my games. You know, you'll probably still see him in competitive, but I feel like he's really rough in solo queue right now. So, you know, Ezreal and Caitlyn are definitely a couple that have fallen down quite a bit over time. Jhin and Misfortune are like, okay, they are going to be better with AP supports because you'll have more kill pressure in lane with like Brand Jhin or Zyra Jhin. So those two are going to move up a little bit. But I'm just not quite sure if I want to place them above the hyper carries yet. But I think that the presence of AP supports does make those early game AD carries a bit more viable. So I think the AD carry is a bit more balanced than it has been in a while. So there's the only thing that jumps out to me that's like, wow, this is way better than everything else is Trist. But, you know, most other things are going to be like in the ballpark of reasonable, with except for like Kate, Ezreal, and like maybe Sivir and Ashe. Like those champions are definitely on the weak side. But pretty much anything else is potentially, it's like a mainstream AD carry that I can think of right now is going to be at least somewhat viable, at least in some matchups. So, okay, let's get into the supports here. See if we can crank through these pretty quickly because I got to head out of here and go hang out with my buddies in a little bit. So Janna is going to be top of the roost again. I've talked about Janna a ton. The fact that everyone else is getting nerfed around her and she's just untouched again is going to make her the top champion. She's very easy to play compared to a lot of the other champions. I've played Janna a lot, so there's no hate on that. She's very consistent is the way you want to think of it. Like, you know, even someone who doesn't play support a lot, like the auto-filled supports, can play Janna and be very effective in a game. Now, they're not going to be as good as someone who has a ton of practice on Janna, but she is very good in that style of play. So, yeah, and she's, you know, top of the chain by a couple of percentage points. And once again, the top of the chain doesn't matter, but she's also the most picked support. So that's important to note, is that someone who has a 12% play rate and is also that high of a win rate, that means there's kind of something going on with that champion. And like I said, she kind of has a bad matchup against Zyra early on, but a lot of people aren't playing Zyra. Zyra doesn't have a huge play rate, and Zyra is harder to play than Janna, so it's like it's on the Zyra to outplay the Janna pretty much. So Zyra, yeah, has a pretty low play rate. But yeah, I mean, she just scales really well into the late game. She has good defense with these runes, and a lot of people don't go for these runes. But like Guardian, Font of Life, Second Wind, Revitalize, Zombie Ward, and Genius Hunter, it's awesome. It kind of shores up her early game, gives you some extra health to survive. Font of Life is great with Ardent Sensor. You slow somebody with your W, your whole team's going to get the Ardent Sensor buff. Second Wind helps you out with poke in lane, and then Revitalize is great with your shields, great scaling with your Redemption, your Locket, your ultimate. It's awesome. So that change to the Guardian, or the Resolve tree, was actually really, really good for Janna, Rakan, and Taric. So she definitely benefits from that. As far as like boots, the buff to coin is also really good on her. It's going to give her the extra speed, which is great. Ninja Tab Eye is what I usually get. You might change it over to Mercs. Just some kind of defensive boot is usually a good idea. You can get away with going mobility boots if you want, but she's already so fast that it feels a little redundant. Obviously, it's good, but just like not dying because you're going to have a huge target on your head as Janna. People recognize that you're really strong most of the time and that they need to try to pick you off. So yeah, just some kind of defensive boot's usually a good idea. And then just Redemption Locket Sensor, or if you need a McHale's, you can do a McHale's. I have an entire video that I just did recently on Enchanter itemization, so be sure to watch that video. I talk about Janna, Lulu, and several other champions, and just like which items are overall going to be the best in which situations. So I'm not going to go into that a ton here. I do have it listed for you, but just keep in mind that a lot of this stuff is very flexible. So it's not set in stone. You have to adapt according to what's going on in the game. So just watch that video, and I'll teach you how to think about when you should be getting the different items. Okay, because it's not always set in stone. I would say you should pretty much always get Redemption, but after that, it just kind of depends. Sometimes you want to get Ardent Sensor next. Sometimes you want to get a McHale's Crucible next. There are several different options according to what's going on in the game. So like Ardent Sensor, for example, if your AD carry's really far ahead, if they're up like 20 CS and 2 kills, you might consider Ardent. If your AD carry's behind like 0 and 3, and you think your team's going to get into a lot of team fights and you want to help other people out, you might go something like Locket. If they have something like an Ashe or a Thresh or a Sejuani or some other like big crowd control threat, you might consider going a McHale's Crucible. So lots of different options. So just watch that other video, and I'll walk you through that decision-making process. But yeah, Janna's really good. A lot of stuff that was good against her is not getting played as much, and everything else is getting nerfed all around her, and so she gets buffed sort of by default there. Very good with Trist, Jinx, Xayah, Twitch, all of these other hyper carry champions. She's great. She's not as good with like Misfortune and Jhin and those type of champions. She's still all right, but she's really good with the hyper carries, which is still kind of the AD carry meta that we're in right now. Okay, Zyra is a huge, huge win on this patch. I was already winning a lot with her in solo queue. Like, I think I'm running at like almost a 60% win rate with her over the last like week or so. Week and a half. And I'm climbing like really fast compared to where I was. So Zyra is really good. She is hard to play. But I do have an entire Zyra guide, so watch the Zyra guide on the channel. But basically what it comes down to is she has very consistent poke with her Q. You just Q somebody, you put a plant on them. It doesn't matter how the minion wave is positioned. You don't have to try to get any sort of angle to shoot around minions. You can cast her Q, you know, through minions, and you can cast her E through minions. So that means that the enemy is never really safe. You know, you can hit them anytime, anywhere if you hit your skill shot. So that makes her different from something like a Brand who has to have a clean shot to hit his Q, or who has to get up really close to hit his E. So I think it makes her a little bit better. And her poke is just more consistent. Even if you miss your Q and they're not standing next to the minion wave, it's still going to hit them with a couple of shots off your plant, which doesn't sound like much, but that adds up over time, especially considering you're getting some value out of a missed skill shot, which virtually no other champion has that. So you get a little buffer zone, which adds consistency to her damage. So even when you miss, you're still doing some damage usually. She has really good mana management. Pull her up here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I need to try to make this a faster tier list, so I can get over to my buddy's house. And I've talked about these champions a lot in past tier lists as well, most of them. But yeah, her seeds don't cost any mana, and so that means that her mana management is a lot better than something like Brand. So she doesn't have to get any mana items. You can just get the Frost Fang, get an extra Fairy Charm if you want, and just sell it later. You'll lose 37 gold on the transaction, but it'll give you a much stronger laning phase. If you just deny 2 extra CS with that Fairy Charm and then sell it back, boom, it's worth the cost. If you just deny the enemy, 40 gold off of 2 CS, that pays for the 37 that you're investing for some temporary mana. So I think that makes her really good. Great mana management, great damage, very consistent damage, excellent scaling into the late game, extremely good with Leandri's Rylai's because most of her damage comes from her plants, which have a pretty low AP ratio, but they have a pretty high base damage. Remember, this is every time the plant hits them. So, if a plant hits them 3 times at level 9, that's 180 damage off of something that doesn't cost any mana. And there can be multiple of them. That's a lot. Now, it is 50% less damage if you hit multiple targets. But overall, it's just, she's really, really good right now. And she's very good against Janna in the laning phase. You should completely shatter a Janna lane with any AD carry matchup most of the time. If the jungle doesn't come down there to gank you, which Keep in mind, if you're playing Zyra, they probably will, because, you know, the enemy team is going to be crying constantly under their tower. Please, the Zyra's overpowered. How do we deal with her? She keeps pushing us in a tower. We can't fight her, which is all true. So just keep in mind that they're going to be talking to their jungler the whole time, crying and asking for ganks. And so the jungler's probably going to come down there. So just keep that in mind. Zyra does have to push the lane because her plants are going to attack minions, at least sometimes. And so you don't really have any sort of option in terms of positioning. It's going to push the lane most of the time. So just make sure that it's a, you know, a matchup where you want to push the lane. If you have two other losing lanes, then that might be a really bad thing, because the other lanes are going to get pushed in and you're going to be really open to ganks. And watch out for globals too. If they have like a TF, a Talia, teleports, anything like that, if they get behind you, you're probably dead, because you don't have any escapes as Zyra. So she's a very dangerous champion, but she's an extremely powerful champion. She's one of the only champions that can 100-0 take out, you know, most targets by herself, at least in the early game, and even later into the game. You know, if it's a squishy target that doesn't have a lot of magic resist, then she's going to be really good. So, once again, you want to be getting Sorcerer Boots, Watchers, Liandry's, Rylai, Void Staff, Death Cap. After you complete Liandry's, you can consider going Oblivion Orb. It's 1,500 gold. It will give you the spell pin. That's very good. But that's going to slow down your Rylai's build. Which means that a lot of the time your Liandry's is only going to be doing like half of its potential damage on its passive. I do all the math. I have a video about all the AP items too that I just released yesterday, so be sure to check that out if you want. I've got videos about everything on the channel. But yeah, you really want to be completing that. The good news is that a lot of these items now build out of the same stuff, which is great, which means it's very modular. So you can, for example, just go ahead and buy a Ruby Crystal, Amp Tome, and then just think about it. Just say, okay, let's see where the game goes, you know, over the next 5 minutes, and just see, am I going to have a lot of gold? Do I need a power spike immediately? So maybe you get those two, and then you don't get a lot of other gold. Maybe you only have, you know, whatever it is, the 665 damage when you back, and you're just about to like try to contest a Baron, or you're just about to contest an Infernal Dragon. You think to yourself, okay, I need this power right now. Then you could go ahead and just buy Oblivion Orb with your Amp Tome and your Ruby Crystal, right? But maybe you just got a few kills, and now you're coming back with like, I don't know, 1,200 gold or something like that. There's not an immediate objective where you know, need to have a power spike like right now to contest it. So then you can say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and buy a Blasting Wand and just save up for Rylai's. Or conversely, you could buy a Blasting Wand and then an Amp Tome, and then just kind of wait and see, okay, do I want to complete a Void Staff, or do I want to complete a Rylai's? Maybe you look at their items. Maybe, you know, they're really fed, I don't know, Sejuani just bought an Adaptive Helm, and they have Mercury Treads and some other piece of magic resist. Maybe you're like, wow, I really need to get Void Staff right now because this major threat has, you know, 2 items that have magic resist on it. Or maybe you look at it and say, hey, nobody on their team has magic resist, so I'm just going to go ahead and get Rylai's just so I can help kite away some of these fighters, you know, like a Camille or a Fiora or something like that. So she has options for sure, right? And a lot of her builds are very modular now. So they have a lot of the same pieces that you can use to interchangeably and just make decisions based on the game state. But in general, you know, if you're still not really sure about interpreting the game state, you just want a basic build, this is what you should do. Okay, Liandry, Rylai, Void Staff, Death Cap. But if you're a bit more advanced, if you're used to thinking about the game state, you know, sort of adjusting your items on the fly according to what's going on, then this the new itemization gives you a lot better choices. And you can also get Morello's if you have to. You're going to lose DPS by doing that, but if you get the Oblivion Stone, then it's just 1,500 more to go ahead and get Morello, and that will give you the healing debuff for something like a Soraka, Vlad, Swain, Mundo, things like that. Then you might have to be the one who gets that if no one else on your team does. So that is an option as well. As far as runes, Comet, Mana Flow, not Absolute Focus. I don't know why I said Absolute Focus. I can't remember the name of it. Let me see. The thing that gives you the CDR was something I have been toying around with lately. Although Absolute Focus, like, wouldn't be bad. Maybe. I don't know. Because you are above 70% health a lot. I feel like an extra 11 AP in lane. Because you are usually the person who's, you know, attacking the enemy. I mean, maybe absolute focus. I was thinking Transcendence, because the 10% CDR is very nice for having more plants, having more ults, things like that. And you have a hard time itemizing for CDR as Zyra, so... Celerity, if you're against something where you have to dodge skill shots, like you're dodging Brand W's or Blitzcrank hooks or something, you might have to get Celerity. That's a pretty big hit to your DPS. But now that I'm thinking about it, Absolute may not be awful if they're not going to poke you. So if you're against like a tank or something like that, and you're pretty confident you're going to be able to stay at relatively high health, like you're against Tom Kench or Braum or something like that, you could get this. If you're against like a Brand or a Nami or just something else that's probably going to poke you back, you may not want to get this. But I could see that situationally, so I don't know. All three of these are pretty legit. I'll just say Transcendence or Celerity, but I think Absolute could be good in some matchups. But I had been trying Transcendence lately, and that actually feels pretty good. It gives you a lot more windows of power later in the game. Okay, so yeah, Zyra, really good on this patch. Best of the AP options, I think. Lulu, I think Lulu's making a comeback, kind of similar to Janna. She's just the early game aggression version of Janna, because there will likely be less sustain in lane early on, and because you can scale really well with hyper carries, most notably Varus, Twitch, and Kog'Maw, because they go on hit builds, they go Gensu's. Well, in Twitch doesn't go Gensu's, but he does go like Hurricane, and he does go, he gets a lot of attack speed. Then Lulu's really good. So if you do have the Cog, you do have the Twitch, you do have the Varus, that's when Lulu's going to be best. She's not nearly as good with something like a Jhin. She wants to be with champions that benefit a lot from her extra attack speed, particularly Hurricane users. So she's good. She has early game aggression. She has, you know, a really good steroid with her W. She has nice defense with her R. She is winning a lot in general right now. So that's good. What do people get on her? Yeah, I mean, just the standard, like, similar to the Janna build, Redemption Locket, Ardent Sensor's good. Athene's is, like, an okay item on her. Yeah, I would probably... Now, you can go Airy. I guess Airy was probably the best. Like, you really need Mana Flow early, so Airy, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, and then I would probably go with the Font of Life, Revitalize. Actually, no. I would want the... If you're going to get Redemption, you're going to get Locket, which you should most of the time. I would go Zombie Ward and Genius Hunter, so that you get the cooldown reduction and the superior vision control. So yeah, Lulu pretty good, particularly if you have one of those 380 carries that I mentioned before and you want some early game aggression. She's a great choice. I think Rakan is probably going to be one of the best engaged champions that's left, and the reason is he benefits so heavily from the changes to the Resolve tree. So he loves, like, Font of Life, pretty good, especially if he gets Ardent later. Font of Life, Second Wind, Revitalize. That's really good. And then Ingenious Hunter and Zombie Ward. And just the fact that you're going to be seeing less Alistars, Braum, Tom, and Taric is just great news for him. Because he has a hard time picking off those kinds of tanks. And just anything with a lot of crowd control is going to be good against him. So you do not want to see something like Morgana is just a nightmare for him. Janna's not a fantastic matchup, but she's like okay for him. But yeah, if your team needs engage, if you just have no way to start a fight, he's one of the best options right now because he's both an enchanter and a really hard engage champion. So, and he has a very reliable engage. You don't have to sit around and wait to hit like a Q with Morgana or anything like that. Like, that can work, but he's just like point click, boom. Then he has really nice scaling with AP as well. So I think that's good. I wouldn't get any like the spooky ghost or anything with him. You know, I would just go the standard, you know, Redemption, Locket, Ardent Sensor build most of the time. But yeah, he's really good, especially now that Xayah's moving up a little bit. Now that things like Callista, things like Ezreal have been nerfed, then Xayah's going to be moving up the ranks. You're going to see more and more Xayah, and she's great with him. He's surprisingly, like, pretty decent against Zyra. And the reason is he can engage, he can like, you know, RW engage. Then after he knocks her up and Xayah's like sticking all the feathers on her, then he can jump back to Zyra before Zyra can hit him with the roots once she lands. Because usually what happens with Zyra is if you try to dive her, you're probably going to die doing it because she's just going to EU, put all the plants down, and then just ult. And then even if she dies, you're going to be sitting in a ton of these like enraged plants, and then someone else on their team is going to kill you. If that happens. But Rakan, because he's so mobile, because he can go in and he can get out, a lot of times he can afford to hard engage on Zyra and still get out and live to tell about it. Same thing with Xayah. She's really good against Zyra because if Zyra ever tries to hit her with the ult or her roots or whatever, she can just use her ultimate to get out of it. So Zyra Rakan is pretty good against Zyra lanes a lot of the time. So that could be you know, something to consider there. Nami, I think, is going to get a little bit better just because the tanks are going to get worse. Braum is very good against Nami, and I think we're going to start to see Braum fall off a little bit. She can apply really good early game pressure, so she's great against something specifically like Lulu and Janna because they're not going to be able to fight back and keep up with her healing. So if you can get a really big advantage early on off of just spamming your W on people, then that could be really good. Now, you are going to get outscaled later in the game by Janna and Lulu, so you need to make sure you're up like at least 20 CS in lane. You do have good kill pressure if you land bubbles on people. So that's, you know, that's good. So she's all right. So basically she's early game, lots of pressure. She's very good with things that want to run people down, like a Vayne, for example, with her slow. Like Jinx, you can run people down with Jinx, get those resets. So, I mean, she's pretty good with almost everybody. You know, most of the 80 carries, even things like Misfortune and Jhin, because you can combo bubbles with their crowd control and just get a nice CC chain going. She just doesn't have as much kill threat in lane as something like Zyra does. But she does have better sustain. And sustain is going to be more valuable because, you know, all of these other avenues of sustain, like Relic Shield, Second Wind, stuff like that, just got nerfed. So she definitely is going to move up in position a little bit. Alistar is going to be one of the better tanks left because he has a really solid engage and he has his own sustain in lane. So yeah, losing the Relic Shield sustain from the last patch does hurt tanks a little bit, but Alistar has his own sustain built into his kit. So historically, that's why Alistar has been one of the best tanks, is because he has sustain and he's hard engage. So Alistar is still pretty good, and if he gets on someone like Zyra, then, you know, he can definitely kill her or at least force her to use some summoners. And the same thing with like Janna and Lulu. If he gets on him, you know, he can do some damage. So Alistar will still be all right. Blitzcrank's going to gain a little bit more value because there's a lot more squishy champions he can hit. You're going to be seeing more Brand, Zyra, Janna, Lulu in a lot of different games. And so that's going to be more good targets for Blitzcrank. So Blitz will do what Blitz does, hook people, try to blow him up. So I think that he's going to gain a little bit because, you know, if you hook the Tom Kench or you hook the Alistar, you hook the Braum, stuff like that, it's not going to be that great. It can work, but that can also backfire on you real badly. So Blitz is good. Also, he's going to be good against some of these relatively immobile mages that are going to be coming back. So, you know, if he gets a hook on a Talia or an Anivia, for example, that's going to be really good. So someone like Alistar is going to have a hard time engaging on Anivia because she has so much zone control. She can stun him, or she can like wall him off, or like use her ult to slow him. Like, it's just really hard to get to Anivia sometimes. But with Blitzcrank, you can land that hook and pull her out of position. So that's good. And the same thing with Talia. She just has great zone control. Difficult to get to her. Blitz can work around it if he gets a hook. Now, that's not going to be as good against Malzahar, but a lot of these other champions is going to be good. Oh, and I forgot honorable mentions. I think Azir and Ryze will still kind of be near the top of the roost for AP carries and pro play. But in solo queue, they're really hard to play correctly, so I just had them a little bit lower. Echo's another kind of wild card here. I think Echo can be really, really strong. Like, the buff to death cap is huge because he has massive AP ratios, and he would like to get that item. Probably third. He'd probably go Protobelt Lichbane death cap, but that's a really good buff for Echo's mid to late game. Okay, other champions, Soraka. Pretty big buff for Soraka on this patch because people aren't going to be getting Morellonomicon as much, so the 80 carry can still get executioners, but once again, that's an 800 gold tax on the AD carry, and a lot of AD carries, especially at gold, silver, bronze, are just not going to do it. They're just not going to buy it, so that's good. And she does line up really well against Lulu and Janna because she can outscale them later in the game as long as the AD carry, you know, doesn't have executioners. Even then, she can still maybe heal through some of it, you know. So she kind of has a bad matchup against Zyra, depending on... It's iffy. If Zyra ever catches you with a root, she can all-in and kill you, but you can heal through her poke in lane. So I mean, maybe Soraka deserves to be a bit higher, because there aren't as many engaged champions. I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, Soraka could be as high as the very top of Tier 2. It's difficult to say. I would hesitate to put her in Tier 1 because I wouldn't want to pick her blind. Like, these champions, I think you can pick blind and still be okay in most matchups. I would hesitate to put her up there, though, because she does have some rough matchups. Like, Blitz in particular is really tough on her. And just any sort of assassins. Like, if they have Fizz, Talon, Zed, Kane, like, all of these champions are still going to be pretty popular. She can have a tough time. Now, early on at least. Now, she does have the option of going something like Warmogs. And this build did just get a lot better for her because now she can go Second Wind. Second Wind and Revitalize with Guardian. So you can go Ninja Tabi and then Eye of the Watchers. I wouldn't go the Equinox build anymore. I've talked about that in the past, potentially being a possibility. And then eventually you can maybe go Warmogs like level 13 or 14 if you want to, but that build is going to be harder to do after they nerfed Equinox. So she's okay. She could be as high as very high tier 2 because she does have good matchups, like I said, but she still has some kind of bad ones. So we'll see, especially against Assassins. If you want to pick her, I'd wait till like 3rd or 4th pick at least. Okay, Brand's going to be up a lot. I talked about Zyra. Brand's very similar to Zyra. He just has less consistent poke and less consistent all-in because you have to have a clear shot to hit your Q. And you have to hit 2 skill shots most of the time to get the full combo. So you have to hit your W, then you have to hit your Q. You can, in theory, walk up to them and just point-click, hit them with your E, and then hit them with your Q. And then you only have to hit 1 skill shot. But his E is super short range. Where is old Brand here? Here we go. His E is going to be super short range for a mage. You know, it's only 625 range, which is really close compared to something like 900 range on his W. You know, 800 or 900 range is kind of a much more comfortable range for a lot of mages. So getting in close to like 625, I mean, it's almost walking into auto attack range of a lot of 80 carries. It's closer than a Caitlyn auto attack. So, that can definitely be dangerous. And he has mana problems. All of his abilities cost mana, unlike Zyra, whose plants are free. So he definitely can run out of mana pretty quickly, especially spamming your W to try to harass people. So he is good. He's very good with Leontrys and Rylai's. He's really good in team fights. You just press R if a bunch of people are grouped up, and you're going to do a ton of damage. So he's still pretty good. He's an easier version of Zyra. But I think, like I said, his mana management is worse. His consistent poke and his ability to land the skill shots in lane are going to be harder than Zyra. And then he doesn't have the plants, and Zyra can use those plants for really good scouting tools and for contesting control wards and bushes. I talk about all that in my Zyra guides. I've been streaming Zyra a lot lately if you go back and watch some of my Zyra games. So I think Zyra is still just a better version of Brand, but Brand is pretty good. Brand's a little bit more like straightforward. Zyra, there's like some trickier interactions you have to be aware of. Taric, I have him in here because I think he's going to be one of the peeler tanks that's still probably going to be pretty good because he scales really well later into the game. He scales off of plus healing and shielding really well, so he can still go something like Redemption Locket, Knight's Vow, and be okay. Whereas some of these other champions just aren't going to have the same level of scaling as Taric does. So I think Taric will be okay. I mean, I think he'll get completely blown out of the water in lane by something like a Zyra or probably a Lulu, and I think that Lulu and Janna are going to scale better than he does in many cases. The problem with Taric, too, is if you're playing against mages that have really heavy poke or really heavy sustained damage, he's not going to be as good. His ultimate is best when they have a lot of like burst damage or crowd control that they heavily rely on, and then you're able to just run in with your team and just absorb a lot of their initial damage and then just kill them. But against something like an Anivia or a Talia, they can zone you out. Like, after you cast that ult, they can wall you off. They can knock you back with the W. They can disengage with, like, Talia's wall. They have a lot of tools to disengage and get your team off of them. Or something like Zyra, she can still knock everybody up with her R. It's not going to do damage, but it'll stall them. And then the plants will still be sitting there just pounding away on people once the invulnerability ends. So, you know, I think that the Taric ult is pretty good, but if you're going to be seeing more things like Azir, like Ryze, Talia, Anivia, these things that do very high, consistent, sustained damage, that have potential disengage as well, like Azir can knock people back with his ult, then I think his ult's going to become a lot less valuable than it was. So it's still good, it's just not going to be as good as it was in the previous meta, I don't think. Okay. Tier 3, and this is the last I'm going to talk about, and then I got to get going here. I really would like to keep this... It's already longer than an hour. I was trying to keep it to an hour. But Tahm Kench, still good, mostly as a counter pick. If people actually pick Thresh or Leona, which I don't expect to see a lot of that, but if they do, he's good. Good against Ashe. To a lesser extent, okay against Varus. So Tom's all right, but these nerfs to tanks are going to hurt him, so I would only pick him as a counter picker. Braum can be good. Like, he does have a good matchup against Xayah and Twitch because he can block their area of effect attacks they do. So you get a huge benefit. So if you want to pick Braum, I would pick him specifically against Twitch or against Xayah or against Nami. Or just these other champions that rely very heavily on kind of these telegraphed area of effect attack type of things. So he's alright. Morgana, similar to Tahm Kench. I would only pick her as a counter pick right now against a lot of crowd control CC. She's pretty good against something like a Rammus, because she can block his taunt and his when he tries to bump into somebody, and she can potentially Q to knock him out of his role. So pretty good counter pick if you see Rammus. Pretty good against Rakan. So she's viable in certain matchups, right? But she's going to be really bad in other ones. She's okay against Zyra, but the problem is Zyra will break your shield and just poke you out in lane a lot of the time. So she's okay. She's all right. I just don't think she has wonderful matchups against Zyra or Janna. They're like okay, but not amazing. Vel'Koz, I have him here specifically because I think he's a great pick into Brand and Zyra, who are both going to be pretty popular. And I explained that earlier. He just has longer range with his Q. If you ever hit him with a Q, slow him. And then if you ever hit him with a knockup, they're dead. But even if you just hit him with a Q and just poke him down to like half health and then hit him with, you know, one final Q and then channel your ult, you're going to force him to flash a lot of the time. So he just outranges them, but he still does really respectable, strong damage in team fights as well. And he's magic damage. You know, historically, something like a Misfortune would be pretty good too, but she's been nerfed a lot of support and she's 80 damage. I think AP is a lot stronger right now. Something like Xerath can be good as well, but he doesn't have as strong of an impact in a team fight. So I just prefer Vel'Koz as sort of a pocket counter pick to Zyra and Brand. Sona, pretty good. I just think she gets outclassed by Janna, Lulu. She doesn't have any steroids. So she's alright. She's better than she was, but she still has some mana problems. She still has some scaling problems, though. She's better than she was. She's okay. I just think that some of these other champions are going to be a bit stronger than she was. Bard. I know a lot of people love Bard. He's alright. You know, he's going to be better because they're not going to have as much sustain in lane. So your poke's going to be a lot more meaningful. He just has some real scaling problems, and I mean, like, your meeps are good. They're good for sure, but, like, his E and his R have no scaling components to him, and his W is pretty mild in terms of scaling, so I think he's going to get outscaled by some of these other champions. But he can be really good. Like, he has a good matchup into Zyra if you stun people off of her plants. If you land really good ults, you know, that can be very impactful. So if you want to play Bard, you really need to be a one-trick. But he's okay. I wouldn't recommend him unless you're a one-trick, but he is fun. He is interesting. He is cool, but just be prepared to have a major learning curve if you want to learn how to play Bard correctly, because there are a lot of weird things about him, and you really have to leverage roaming well. And the problem is, if you roam, then your AD carry is just going to die a lot of the time in silver and bronze, and gold. But, you know, if you have a duo that you play with who's not going to die, or, you know, you just think that your AD carry is going to be safe enough, you know, maybe if they're Tristana or Ezreal or something, maybe you could go roam with him. So he can be alright. I just think there's just a lot more ifs about Bard than there are some of these other champions that are a bit higher ranked. Shen, still pretty good as an early game sort of aggressive tank champion. I would just prefer Alistar most of the time, but Shen can be safer. He does have a global ultimate, which is nice. He does scale a lot better in terms of damage, so Shen can still be pretty good. Thresh has fallen off a lot. I wanted to almost just knock him to the bottom of tier 3, but if you're still a one-trick Thresh and you're really good with him, you know, you can still definitely win some games. You can still definitely win some games with him, but, you know, the nerf to Targon's hurts him a lot, specifically because he really has to get that Eye of the Equinox. He's running out of items that he can get because they got rid of Ruby Sightstone, and they've nerfed a lot of the other items that are good on him. So they've nerfed Knight's Vow. You know, that was several patches ago, but it just hasn't been a good time for Thresh lately. And I don't think it's going to get a lot better. I think he has a pretty bad matchup against Zyra. He's okay against Janna. Like, he's all right. If you're really good on Thresh, you can make him win, but he's not in a great place right now. Leona, really good, hard engaged. They nerfed her damage a lot, though. I'd probably just rather play Alistar if you want that type of champion, but she can be all right. It's just tanks definitely got hit on this patch. And then Karma, okay team fighter. I would just rather play Nami or Lulu or Janna, depending on what you want. I just feel like Karma just doesn't quite have enough juice. You know, she's like okay at everything, but not great at anything specifically. So, you know, if you really want a poke champion that has like good harass early on, you can do Nami. If you want more kill threat in lane, you could do Zyra. If you want better scaling, you could do either Lulu or Janna. I just feel like there are people that just do what she wants to do better. So she's okay. Then other notable picks, Sion, Zillion, Fiddlesticks, you can win with them, or Vhagar, like you can win with them. They're interesting. I just don't recommend him most of the time. Fiddlesticks is pretty good into something like a Rammus. He might be better than this. Like, he might deserve to be in tier 3. I don't know. We'll have to see how it pans out, but he's okay. If anything, he's a very niche, like, specific counter pick. Sion, I know a lot of people love Sion. I just think that he's really inconsistent. If you're going to play with Sion, you have to win early game, and now that they've just nerfed the tanks a lot more, it's tough. If you want to play him, I do it with Misfortune or Jhin or something like that that has a lot of kill threat, or Draven maybe early in lane. If you can snowball hard enough early, it'll be great. Other than that, he's going to fall off hard. There's just a lot of counterplay to his abilities. His scaling with support items is very limited. You know, if you just want an aggressive tank early, I would just go with Alistar, Shen, Leona, something like that. I think it's just going to be a better option. If you want a better peeler tank, I'd just go with Tahm Kench, Taric, Braum. I feel like there's always something I'd rather play other than Sion, but you can win with him if you want to play him early. And then finally, Zillion. I know people love Zillion on the channel. They're always asking, where's Zillion? You know, I just don't know where he would fit in. Like, I know that I think he's like the highest win rate supporter. No, not support. Maybe it was mid lane. I just don't know where he fits in. Like, he's kind of an odd duck. He has decent early game damage. He can speed people up and slow them down, but he doesn't have any steroids like Lulu or Janna for the 80 carry. You know, he does have his R, which is nice, but it has a lot of counterplay to it if people just stop attacking that person. So he's okay. If you're really good with Zillion, you can definitely, you know, make him work and win. I just would not recommend him for the general population. If you want to play him, you know, I think you should one-trick him, but otherwise, I just think that there's other stuff I'd play most of the time. I know he's wonderful. He's great. People love him. Just, if you love him, play him. Win with him. It's great. But just, you know, remember this video is targeted towards, you know, just the larger audience of people that are watching. And I just don't think he's just a good casual support for most people to pick up right now. He's okay. If you really love him, you can definitely win with him. But anyways, and then these other ones, like, you can win. I'm sure there's some, you know, nuggets in there that people will love. They'll say, but what about this champion? It's awesome. I can definitely win. What about Annie or Malzahar or Trundle or Zyra support or Poppy support? You can win with all of these, but the video's already getting kind of long. And I'm just going to go ahead and end it there. But you can definitely win with anything. These are just kind of the top 30 that I recommend, you know, or top 20, really. The tier 1 and through the tier 3. Tier 1 is always the top 10, tier 1 and tier 2, and then tier 3 is the 10 to 20, or 11 to 20 rather. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.